Hi there, I'm Cheryl. My parents cut me out of their $325,000 legacy plan, and I cut them out of my life without a single word. You'd think the hardest part was losing the money, but it was being erased, piece by piece, from the family I thought I belonged to. They deleted me from their stories, their memories, even from the legacy video at Thanksgiving. But why would a family go to such lengths to silence one of their own? Have you ever felt like the black sheep at your own dinner table? Have you ever been written out of a life you helped build? Tell me, what time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I really want to know. Thanksgiving morning smelled like dry leaves and overcooked nostalgia. I sat in my car outside the house I once called home, hands resting stiffly on the steering wheel. The porch light flickered as if to mock my hesitation. I should have driven off. But something in me needed to see it through, to see them. I stepped out into the crisp Austin air, adjusting my coat against the bite of a Texas November that pretended it was winter. The house looked different now, too polished, like it had been renovated to erase every trace of warmth. The white columns were brighter, the garden was trimmed with unnatural precision, and the brass nameplate on the mailbox gleamed like it belonged to strangers. Inside, laughter floated out, muffled and distant. No one had noticed I was late. No one had texted. When I pushed open the front door, the smell of spiced cider hit me like a wave. My stepmother, Pamela, glanced up from the kitchen island. "Oh, you made it," she said, as if I were a guest she hadn't expected to show. Chris raised his beer in lazy acknowledgement. Frederick, my father, barely looked up from his phone. "Nice of you to join," Pamela muttered as she turned back toward the oven. I slipped into the hallway, toward the study, half out of habit, half out of the need to breathe. That's when I heard them. "She never really contributed," Pamela was saying, her voice low, deliberate. "It's better this way. Clean." Simple Frederick didn't argue. Something twisted inside me, slow and sharp. I stood frozen until they moved on. Then I stepped into the study where documents had been carelessly fanned across the desk. One caught my eye, a trust amendment. I didn't even have to read all of it. My name wasn't there, but Chris's was, in bold. There it was, proof that I had been cut out of the $325,000 legacy plan, not discussed, not warned, just erased. The clinking of silverware called me back. Dinner was being served. I walked into the dining room, a ghost in my own bloodline. "We have a little surprise," Frederick announced as Pamela beamed beside him. The lights dimmed. A video began to play on the living room TV, photos of childhood, graduations, holidays. I watched, heart rate steady only on the surface. Photo after photo rolled. Chris on his 5th birthday, Pamela holding a newborn, Frederick handing Chris a diploma. No trace of me. Not even a group shot where I should have been standing awkwardly at the edge. Then came the final clip, Chris receiving a community award. The words, "The future of the Tokar legacy," floated under his smiling face. My fork dropped. No one turned. They didn't just forget me, they deleted me. I felt something in me give way, not grief, not even rage, just vacancy. I stayed seated through the rest of dinner, lips moving when required, body present, but soul scraping the edges. It wasn't about the money, it was the message. After dessert, I made my way to the powder room, locked the door. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone, tapped into an encrypted file I'd hidden from everyone, even myself. Surveillance logs, legal documents, testimonies. A quiet voice echoed in my mind, my mother's, from years ago. "Never let them steal your name, Cheryl." I stared at the screen, at all the pieces I had collected over the years. They had taken their shot. Now it was my turn. I've stayed silent long enough. I walked back to the dining room like a woman slipping into someone else's skin. My chair was still pulled out, the wine untouched. The air smelled like cinnamon and smugness. I sat quietly, scanning the room, each voice sharper now, each face clearer in its intent. Applause erupted from the living room. Another video clip. I turned just in time to see Chris projected onto the screen, standing beside Senator Elridge at the Capitol Policy Summit. I knew that conference like the veins on my own hand. I'd drafted every policy brief, coordinated every speaker, ran logistics until my eyes blurred. I remembered Chris showing up late with donuts and walking out early with praise. That was Chris's big moment, Frederick said proudly. He drafted the entire framework. Something inside me snapped, silently. My jaw ached from how tightly I clenched it. I thought about the months I'd poured into that project, the nights I skipped dinner to fix citations, the mornings I edited notes before court. Chris had taken my laptop once, said he needed to print. He must have copied everything, and now my work wore his name. No one noticed the way my hand curled around the stem of the wine glass, knuckles pale. They were too busy watching my brother bask in applause meant for someone else. Me. During dessert, I tried to swallow the bitterness, but it was no use. Words began to echo around the table like a script rehearsed behind my back. "She's brilliant," Chris told someone across the table, his voice warm, his eyes avoiding mine. "But she's always been fragile." A hush fell. Someone chuckled nervously. It was the kind of silence that knew better but stayed quiet anyway. Pamela leaned in. "She gets overwhelmed sometimes. You know, always so intense." I looked up. Their faces blurred behind the fog of disbelief. This wasn't a spontaneous slip. It was a coordinated whisper campaign. I saw it now, woven into every dinner I hadn't been invited to, every call that went unreturned. I remembered the panic attack I'd had in law school, my first time standing in front of a packed courtroom. I'd been 19. They'd said I was brave. Then, over time, the story changed. Now it was ammunition. I stared at Chris, my voice low and even. "I'm not the fragile one here." The table stiffened. Someone cleared their throat. Frederick tried to pivot the conversation, muttering something about football. But the damage was done. I could see it in their eyes, the unease, the doubt. A seed had been planted, and they all watered it with silence. After dinner, I stepped out onto the patio. The cold slapped my cheeks like a warning. The stars above Austin glittered like they knew secrets I didn't. I sipped from my glass, letting the wine burn. They were rewriting me while I was still in the room, but I wouldn't let them finish the story. Not this time. My phone buzzed, a message. "Hey, heard something about your mental state. Everything okay?" It was from an old investor, a contact I hadn't spoken to in months. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen. It begins. I sat cross-legged on the edge of my old bed, fingers grazing the frayed edge of a quilt Mom had sewn when I was 12. The room still smelled like lavender sachets and wood polish, unchanged, yet not untouched. My body was present, but my mind was peeling back decades. 16 years ago, I stood outside this same door, barely breathing as I listened to Mom sob into her pillow. Frederick's voice had boomed downstairs, and all she'd done was cry quietly. I'd thought silence meant strength, but now I knew better. Silence doesn't preserve peace. It buries people alive. My phone buzzed in my lap. The investor's name glowed across the screen. "We're reevaluating our partnership," the message read. Below it, a link. I tapped it. A tabloid headline opened like a slap. "Unstable heir?" Questions swirl around Cheryl Tokar's role in the family legacy. My photo sat just beneath the headline, cropped from a charity gala 2 years ago, eyes mid-blink, expressionless. The caption mocked me. I scrolled past the opening paragraphs, straight into the poison. "She's always been emotionally volatile," one anonymous source wrote. "Hard to work with. Thinks she's smarter than everyone," another claimed. They were repeating Chris's narrative, word for word, but now it was out there, beyond Thanksgiving tables and polite whispers. Now it had teeth. Comments rolled in like waves, relentless and dirty. I saw people I once helped in pro bono cases tag the article with yikes and laughing emojis. I saw professional bridges catch fire in real time. My reputation wasn't bruised, it was hemorrhaging. I couldn't sit still. The air in the room pressed against my skin like damp cotton. My keys were already in my hand before I realized I'd stood up. The streets of Atlanta blurred past as I drove, not fast, but with purpose. Gypsy's restaurant stood in the same corner plaza it always had. The windows glowed warm. Inside, she was wiping down the counter. I didn't wait to be invited in. She turned, startled. "Cheryl? I want to see it," I said. "Tell me it's not your signature." Her face froze, then softened, then dropped. "I did it for peace," she whispered. "You were never going to stop." I stepped back. My breath caught, but I didn't let her see the wound land. Not here, not in front of her. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just walked out, head held high. But in the car, alone, my hands shook on the wheel. My breath came in fragments. Gypsy had been Switzerland, the one who didn't choose sides, until she did. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, smudged eyeliner, pale lips, eyes that didn't flinch anymore. "You're the only one still fighting for you," I said out loud, and something inside me settled, not with peace, but precision. I wouldn't ask for the truth anymore. I'd drag it out into the light. I turned the key in the ignition. The headlights came on. There, tucked under my wiper blade, was a folded piece of paper. No envelope, no signature. 3 words written in blocky black ink. "Drop it, or else." My apartment was unusually still. No traffic humming from the street, no neighbors arguing in the hallway, just the oppressive quiet of waiting for the next blow. I sat at my desk, staring at a blank case file I hadn't touched since the holiday. My phone blinked twice. No voicemails, no follow-ups. Radio silence. Even the allies I thought I had, suddenly absent. The paranoia wasn't imagined. Something was moving beneath the surface. Then the text came. From Brenda. No greeting, just an image. I tapped it. A screenshot of a bank wire transfer. $25,000. From Frederick's business account to Gypsy's restaurant fund. The date? 48 hours after she signed the document removing me from the trust. I didn't breathe. It wasn't just betrayal. It was itemized. She didn't just pick a side, she cashed in her loyalty. I'd been traded like patio furniture. I whispered it aloud, choking on the bitter syllables. She sold me for a fawning patio. I turned off the screen, just stared at the darkened glass, my reflection looking less human than before. That's when the knock came. 3 measured taps, not urgent, not hesitant, professional. When I opened the door, a man in a suit stood holding a manila envelope. "Cheryl Tokar?" "Yes. This is for you. You've been served." He handed it to me like it weighed nothing, then walked away, not waiting for questions. I closed the door with my shoulder and dropped the envelope on the counter. I didn't touch it for a minute. Then I sliced it open. The letter inside was sterile. No emotion, no warmth, just law. My father's attorney wrote on his behalf, asking me to voluntarily forfeit any future claim to the Tokar estate. For the sake of family unity, as if unity was ever an option. But the last paragraph, cold and polished, made my jaw lock. Any public discussion of this matter will be considered a breach of confidentiality and may result in legal action, including but not limited to character investigation and reputational consequence. I read it again and again. It wasn't a request. It was a silencing threat, wrapped in legalese. They weren't just trying to erase me from their narrative. They wanted to ensure I never wrote my own. My hand gripped the edge of the letter until the paper buckled. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went to my printer, scanned the letter, and highlighted one clause. Any public discussion, breach of confidentiality. I texted the image to Brenda, then typed one word. Soon. The war had changed. It wasn't just personal now. It was strategic. This wasn't about my hurt feelings anymore. This was about truth. and how they'd spent a fortune trying to bury it. I turned back to my desk, cleared off the scattered legal briefs and case notes, then placed the letter beside a single folder, thick with notes, audio clips, old email threads. The label on top read, Legacy Reconstruction Plan, Phase 1. I woke up before the sun, wide-eyed and already angry. The letter was still on my kitchen counter, unopened since I crumpled it the first time. I smoothed it out with the side of my palm. Every word had been etched into my brain, but this morning, I wasn't reading it for pain. I was reading it like evidence. There it was, buried in a dense paragraph of legalese. A clause so precise, so surgical, it made me nauseous. Any verbal or written dissemination, public or private, of family matters, specifically involving Cheryl Tokar's status, conduct, or history, shall be prohibited indefinitely. They didn't just want to cut me out, they wanted to silence me forever. My voice, my story, my damn existence. It wasn't legal protection, it was pre-approved gaslighting. I thought about how often I'd been rewarded for staying quiet as a kid, how silence was confused with grace, and boundaries were always someone else's comfort zone, not anymore. I forwarded the clause to Brenda. "Was this in the original will?" I asked. Her response came quick. "Absolutely not. That's Frederick's edition." Then another ping followed, a scanned PDF. The original will, unsigned and unstained by betrayal. My name, typed in bold, Cheryl Elaine Tokar, beneficiary. My entitlements listed in clean language, not contingent, not optional. But what stopped my breath was the sticky note tucked inside the scanned pages. Handwritten in my mother's cursive, "Don't let them shame her into silence. She is her voice." My hand trembled. I wasn't just erased. I was rewritten. And now I held the manuscript. I didn't wait. I drafted an email and attached every page. Frederick's legal gag, the real will, and the note. Subject line, "Disregard this and you'll meet the public." No salutation, no sign-off. Just the truth. Sent to Frederick, Gypsy, Chris. Then I waited. An hour passed, then 2. My phone buzzed. Brenda. "He's panicking. Be ready. They won't back down quietly." I opened a fresh document on my laptop and labeled it, Tokar Family Legacy, Evidence File. The email came at 7:03 a.m. sharp. One sentence from Malik, a former intern from my firm. That notary was disbarred in June. A name, a date, a file attached with disciplinary records. I clicked. I read. I clenched my jaw so tight I tasted copper. She had notarized my removal. Her signature was stamped beside the amendment that erased me, and she was a fraud. Not just negligent, disbarred for forgery and witness tampering. I called Brenda. "Do you know her name?" I asked flatly. When I said it, Brenda went silent. Then a whisper. "She was under federal investigation." That woman had no right to sign anything. So it was never just about cutting me out. It was about erasing me with fabricated legality, a forged seal to bury my name in the ground. That's when it shifted. I stopped feeling anger the way fire burns. It was cold now, measured, surgical. I laid out my black dress and stared at it as if it were armor. By evening, I stood in the Saint. Regis ballroom surrounded by polished marble, gold-accented linens, and carefully curated lies. Crystal chandeliers hung above a crowd dressed to impress, clinking glasses as if they'd built the Tokar empire brick by brick. I didn't see them as family anymore. They were players in a rigged production. And tonight, I was rewriting the script. In the corner booth, Marcus waited with the AV team. He nodded once as I handed him the USB. I didn't need to explain. The file was named Play This Now. Then the screen flickered. Instead of a slideshow of family milestones, a black screen appeared, followed by white text. The real story. Gasps rippled before the first image even landed. Frederick's email approving the removal before Cheryl finds out. The notary's disbarment record. Trust documents with timestamps that clashed fatally. A scanned will. My mother's note. Photos of me at family foundations, fundraising events, award ceremonies, photos they had scrubbed clean. Someone in the crowd murmured, "What is this?" Another voice, "That's Cheryl." I didn't flinch. I stood in the back, my hands at my sides, steady. I wasn't there to shame them. I was there to reveal them. Gypsy broke first, fled the ballroom, tears streaking down her makeup. Frederick stood frozen, lips parted but silent. Chris turned pale, then red, then pale again. Pamela, as always, just sipped her champagne like poison had no taste. I left before the final image faded. I didn't need the applause or the explanations. The truth spoke enough. As I reached the marble exit, I paused. Pamela stood across the room, eyes locked on mine. Her expression was unreadable, half sorrow, half scorn. But she didn't move. She never does. Outside, a stranger in a gray coat stepped toward me. He held out a phone. He said, "You should hear this before you go." My phone hadn't stopped vibrating since the gala. Messages from cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. Missed calls from Gypsy. 3 voicemails from Frederick. All variations of damage control masked as concern. I didn't answer any of them. Then came the envelope. No return address, no note. Just a small USB tucked inside. I slid it into my laptop like it might bite. Audio only, static. Then Frederick's voice, low and clinical. "She's the loose end. Cut her." Silence. Another voice. "Chris? Are you sure?" She was never supposed to be in it this deep. She complicates things. The date stamp sent a chill through my chest. Weeks before the notary was involved, long before the amendment was filed. I had still been smiling in family photos then, still baking pies for Thanksgiving. He had already decided. The room tilted. I leaned forward, forehead pressing against the cool edge of the desk, willing the nausea to pass. This wasn't heat-of-the-moment betrayal. This was architectural, designed, built brick by brick behind my back while I shook his hand and kissed Pamela's cheek. And now I had proof. The boardroom at the Tokar estate was colder than I remembered. They called it a family reconciliation, but I could smell the desperation the moment I walked in. Pamela sat at the head of the table. Frederick's eyes flicked to the floor when I entered. Gypsy was pale. Chris didn't show. I didn't sit. Instead, I set the speaker on the table. Pressed play. "She's the loose end. Cut her." The sound was surgical, a guillotine in audio form. Frederick shifted. Pamela didn't flinch. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke, calm and unblinking. "Did you know?" Pamela folded her hands in front of her. It wasn't personal. It was survival. My voice cracked before I caught it. "Then what the hell was I to you? A threat?" "You were always separate," she said, her voice smooth. "Too strong for your own good." Gypsy let out a choked sob. "You said she was unstable." Pamela didn't turn. "Because it worked." That was when I understood. It hadn't been about loyalty. It had been about eliminating variables. I was a variable. I turned to Frederick. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't damn him further. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I walked out. As I stepped into the hallway, it hit me. Not grief, not rage, just freedom. For the first time, I wasn't tangled in their expectations or excuses. I wasn't separate. I was their scapegoat. And now, I was out. My phone buzzed as I opened my car door. Unknown number. A voice on the other end, sharp and urgent. "This is Natalie Chen from the Atlanta Chronicle. We're running the story Monday morning, unless you'd like to speak first." The silence after the storm is the loudest thing I've ever heard. I woke up in the same clothes I'd worn to the confrontation. My phone, face down on the nightstand, blinked with missed calls I didn't care to read. The city outside moved like nothing had happened, but everything had. Something fundamental inside me had shifted, calcified. At my doorstep, tucked in a plain manila envelope, sat a piece of the past I didn't know I needed. No return address, no note. Just the weight of something deliberately sent. Inside, a commemorative Tokar family yearbook, produced for the company's 60th anniversary. I remembered the original edition. My mother had helped design it. She'd insisted on documenting the women who built the foundation, not just the men who claimed it. I flipped through the pages with trembling fingers. Her name wasn't there, not once. Pictures that once featured her, Easter brunches, community drives, even the photo of her holding me at my law school graduation, were either cropped or replaced entirely. In their place, Pamela captioned, "The matriarchal cornerstone of the Tokar legacy." It wasn't revision, it was extermination. 16 years ago, I had overheard an argument behind closed doors, my mother's voice firm and unapologetic. "You don't own people, Frederick. You don't own truth." That was the last night she ever hosted a family dinner. Her place was slowly erased after that, first at the table, then in conversation, and now in history. I whispered to the empty room, "You killed her legacy, but I'll resurrect it." The ping of my laptop broke the stillness. An email from Frederick's lawyer. I clicked, unsurprised. "In light of recent misunderstandings, Mr. Tokar wishes to propose a quiet resolution. Attached is a settlement agreement." $200,000. That was the price of my silence. A check in exchange for my voice, my inheritance, my name. Subject line, "Family first, let's move forward." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a fresh email chain, to Brenda, to Natalie, the journalist. I attached the video, the audio file, the scans of the real will, the cropped yearbook, and Frederick's offer. No commentary. Let the facts speak. Let the silence they tried to enforce become the very noise that haunts them. The teaser dropped the next day. Inside the Tokar family scandal, an heiress's truth. My phone buzzed endlessly, but I ignored it all, until one message stopped me cold. From Gypsy. "You've started something none of us can stop. Are you ready for that?" The gates were still gold, still gleaming in the morning sun, just as they had been when I was a girl clinging to a backpack twice my size. I paused on the sidewalk outside the Tokar estate, not to look, but to see it for what it really was. "You don't lose your home when they take it away," I said aloud. "You lose it when you stop believing it ever was." I walked on. No guards stopped me. No one looked out the window. That place was done with me, and I was finally done with it. Back in Savannah, a soft coastal breeze came through the window as I opened Brenda's latest email. There it was, confirmation that the new trust, the one that erased me, had been executed a full year before my mother passed. Not weeks after her death. Not in reaction to the media scandal. But when she was still alive. They'd made the decision to cut me out long before they started pretending it was about my mental state or inappropriate behavior. The timelines, the document metadata, the emails between Frederick and his attorneys, it was all there. They'd buried me in paperwork before I ever had the chance to fight. And with that knowledge, something let go inside me. The confusion, the aching why, the pieces I kept trying to make fit, all of it dissolved. There had never been a seat for me at that table. I'd just spent too long asking for one. I sat down and opened a blank document. Not a post, not an expose, just a letter to no one but me. You took my name off a document, but I reclaimed it for something bigger than your empire. Truth. And truth doesn't need your permission. I deleted it as soon as I finished. No send button, no share, no last shot fired. The war wasn't mine anymore. A week later, I moved into a small townhome just off a quiet street in Savannah. There were creaky steps and a bird feeder already hanging outside. My neighbors waved. No one whispered my name. I began teaching part-time at a local university, women and inheritance law. My students called me Professor Tokar, and not a single one of them asked if I was that Tokar. Brenda's handwritten letter stayed on my fridge. "You are not alone. The law may not always protect the right people, but truth, it travels." Late one night, as I was grading papers, a voicemail popped up from Christopher. "I saw the broadcast," he said, voice hoarse. "I didn't know it was that bad. I guess I'm sorry." I didn't call him back, but I saved it. The next morning, another envelope arrived. Cream-colored, no return address. Inside, a bank slip and one line in embossed script. Tokar Family Legacy, silent fund transfer to Cheryl M. Tokar. No explanation, no letter, no string attached, just what my mother must have arranged, long before any of this unfolded. She had believed in me, and for the first time in years, I didn't need their permission to breathe. Looking back, I realized the fight was never about money. It was about voice, identity, and refusing to be erased. If you're watching this, maybe you've been told you're too much, or not enough. Maybe you've been dismissed, underestimated, or rewritten in someone else's narrative. Let me tell you, you are not what they say you are. You're what you choose to become after they say it. We don't always get justice from the courts or apologies from the people who hurt us, but we can build lives beyond betrayal. And sometimes, walking away is the loudest, strongest thing you'll ever do. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to reclaim your worth after someone tried to take it? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story spoke to you, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't connect with this video, I still want to know why. Every perspective matters. If this story touched your heart, inspired your spirit, or simply made you think, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Your voice belongs here, and you're never alone. Let's keep this conversation going.